The 4 victims who appear before us today are only here because a congressional subpoena has compelled their testimony. Without that subpoena, they would still be unable to share their stories. And before we begin, we should take a moment to observe their bravery. They stood up to their harassers. When they were told to stay silent, they resisted. And when they had the opportunity to appear before Congress and in front of the world, they came forward to give their testimony. This is true courage, and this committee and the American people are grateful. These witnesses are not here for themselves. They are not here to restart their arbitrations. As much as we might like to do so, we in Congress cannot change the outcome of those cases. No, these brave women are here for the countless individuals without a voice. Not just women, but all those who have been assaulted and harassed and don't know where to turn. The person who was fired for reporting sexual harassment and just found out they signed an arbitration clause in that mess of papers they were given on their first day. And the new employee who might be the next victim of a predator operating under the protection of forced arbitration. The survivors before us today were silenced by their forced arbitration clauses. They are here to show us what a world with accountability might look like. I, for one, am here to listen. I thank all of you for being here today. Andowah Newton is Vice President for Legal Affairs and Head of Litigation at LVMH Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, Inc. I hope I got that pronunciation right. Before joining LVMH, that's easier, before joining LVMH in 2015, Ms. Newton litigated complex commercial cases for several years in private practice. Ms. Newton began her legal career as a judicial clerk for the first vice president, judge of the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree from Georgetown University and dual law degrees in U.S. and French law from Cornell Law School and the Sorbonne. Thank you. Ms. Newton, you are recognized for 5 minutes. You put it on your mic?
Turn on your mic.
It's my first time. Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Jordan, and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee, thank you for inviting me here today. It is an immense honor. I am joined by my father, mother, and 2 of my brothers seated behind me. Before I begin, I want to state that my remarks reflect my personal experience only and have not been made in any professional capacity. And I testify under subpoena issued to me by this committee. While my professional and academic profile may not fit the image of someone rendered powerless by and treated inhumanely through forced arbitration, none of my achievements has protected me from the years of intense retaliation, dehumanization, and degradation to which my employer, LVMH, has subjected me. In December 2014, I was offered the position of Director Litigation Counsel for the American affiliate of LVMH Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton, the French conglomerate with brands like Dior, Dom Perignon, Fendi, Givenchy, Veuve Clicquot, and Rihanna's Fenty. I was ecstatic. It was my dream job. I attempted to negotiate several aspects of my employment agreement, but LVMH made it clear that no aspect, including the forced arbitration clause, was negotiable. It was a take it or leave it offer. I accepted and achieved glowing, flawless performance reviews. My boss, the US General Counsel, wrote, "Andowah reflects the highest degree of honesty and ethics in all she does and handles all matters with a calm demeanor." I was soon promoted to Vice President Legal Affairs. But I was also being sexually harassed by LVMH's Director of Property and Facility Operations, Lloyd Doran, a white male about 30 years older than me. He supervised a large staff, reported directly to an SVP who reported to the CEO, and was part of the most senior executives' inner circle. I barely knew him when he began leering at me every time he saw me. He would walk by my office very slowly, skimming the doorway. That escalated to him lurking directly outside of my office for such excessive periods of time that a colleague confronted him about it. At work gatherings, he pointedly leered at me, and as soon as I entered the room, would suddenly appear near me. The fact that he monitored all security videos and oversaw security staff especially concerned me. I repeatedly rebuffed his advances, but that had no effect. One day, he entered my office with the excuse of hanging artwork. Suddenly, without warning, he lunged towards me, thrusting his pelvic area into my face as I sat at my desk. He pinned his body horizontally on top of mine. I exclaimed in shock while trying to unpin my body from under his. After I was able to stand up, he pretended that he had done nothing wrong despite my protests. This left me constantly agitated and distressed, preoccupied with avoiding the trauma of encountering him. I listened out for the ding of the elevators, avoided the stairwells, or working very late in the office, and when I had to, barricaded myself inside my office to try to feel safe. When he continued to lurk outside my office, I became anxious and stressed to the point that I had tremendous difficulty concentrating on my work. It was persistent, disruptive, and suffocating. You would think all you need to do to stop things like this would be to report it. I, too, thought that would end it, but the opposite was true. I was about to receive a horrifying lesson on the power of forced arbitration. In the following days, LVMH ignored my verbal and written reports and failed to do anything to stop it. They instructed me to personally confront him despite the concerns I expressed. My supervisors even reported me for confronting him, and then they investigated me. They disregarded my colleague's testimony who had witnessed some of the behavior and confronted him. Company management even went so far to suggest that I should apologize to him. Ultimately, management blames me for misinterpreting the leering, constant attempts to be near me, and the attempted assault, calling it mere flirtation based on my misunderstanding of French culture, even though Lloyd is American. And I spent many years, as you heard, studying and living in France. They told me this is what executives do in a French company. They seem to justify his misconduct because the general counsel felt, as professional women, there are certain things we have to put up with and sacrifices we have to make. After repeatedly rejecting my request to engage an experienced unbiased investigator, LVMH suddenly reversed course and paid for an outside investigator, but she was unable to keep the facts straight, suggested I should be flattered by the harassment, and asked me if I wanted to keep my job, and warned that I would look like a troublemaker and a son of a bitch, excuse my language. Then, even before completing the investigation, LVMH promoted Lloyd and publicly announced his promotion to all employees at a company event. The investigator initially proposed issuing Lloyd an internal restraining order, but after conferring with LVMH, her final report was modified. Emboldened, Lloyd strutted around the hallway outside my office more than ever. My boss began lowering my annual evaluation ratings and inserting hypocritical and snarky comments. She excluded me from high-profile projects and warned that she would be keeping an eye on me. LVMH left me with no choice but to file a lawsuit. They immediately tried to force my case into arbitration, threatening my attorneys and jeopardizing my career and my livelihood by seeking sanctions against me personally. The CEO then emailed all employees, essentially calling me a liar, misstating LVMH's knowledge, denying any retaliation, and mischaracterizing the investigator's results. He also pretended that a new system created solely for anti-corruption issues suddenly had a secondary function of receiving sexual harassment reports from employees. LVMH repeated similar lies to the press and the court. In 2020, I had to be hospitalized twice due to a serious physical issue, likely triggered by the trauma and stress LVMH incessantly inflicted on me. My case is now in forced arbitration, and I have witnessed firsthand some of the numerous ways it is biased and unjust against survivors. Forced arbitration and the power it provides to employers seems to have emboldened LVMH, who ramped up their retaliation, gaslighting me and inferring that the sexual assault and harassment were figments of my imagination. LVMH has been so relentless in forced arbitration that I had to take unpaid medical leave this year due to their personal attacks. By leveraging forced arbitration, LVMH potentially endangered other employees. Had I not filed a complaint, LVMH would have permitted Lloyd and perhaps others like him to continue working there to this day. Because of forced arbitration and confidential settlements, I may never know the extent to which Lloyd sexually assaulted or harassed others, or if LVMH retaliated against others as they did me. Thank you for unsilencing me today. You each stand in a position of far more privilege and power than most Americans could ever dream of. I hope that you use that position to protect us and your loved ones by ending forced arbitration.
Ms. Newton and Ms. Dushko, you both described work environments in which senior management brushed aside the reports of the sexual harassment you endured. In your view, how would prohibiting arbitration clauses from being enforced in cases of sexual violence and harassment reform workplace cultures that ignore or protect repeat offenders? Ms. Newton?
I think it would send the message immediately that there is no tolerance for this in the court of law. they would know that going in. We cannot get away with this. Right now, they feel like it's open season.
Thank you for that. Ms. Newton, do you have an impression that Louis Vuitton felt responsible for doing due diligence, or did they look like they had concern to really do a thorough investigation of what you spoke about and how you were demeaned, hurt, and harmed?
No, I don't think they had any consideration at all. Everything was done in a really shoddy manner with the intent of burying it.
Thank you. Ms. Newton, you described how members of the legal team at Louis Vuitton, including your direct supervisor and the general counsel, attempted to really brush aside your reports of the sexual harassment that you experienced. And do you think that contributed to the culture where sexual harassment is allowed to flourish and victims are silenced? And what role do you believe that arbitration clauses, what role do they play in terms of individuals not knowing they're going to be held accountable in any meaningful way?
Right, so when I first went to my colleague, because I'm part of the legal team myself, and told him about what was happening, it was first ignored. And then later, when I became insistent about it, I was told, well, I'm not HR, so I can't report this. When things escalated and I filed a written report and I told my boss, the general counsel, this isn't being handled properly and it needs to be. She asked me, have I done something to wrong you? In other words, I was reporting this in order to bother her. It was a bother, it was a disturbance. So that, if I, as an attorney within this company, was basically shunned, dismissed at every single turn, and basically told, you're a nuisance to us by raising these claims of sexual harassment. I can't imagine what the marketing manager goes through, the intern goes through, someone else, So it creates this culture of, don't bring this to us, we don't want to hear it, we don't want to deal with it.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Newton, you got glowing accolades and perfect evaluations from your boss, who was the general counsel of Louis Vuitton. And he wrote that you reflect the highest degree of honesty and ethics in all that you do, and that you achieve excellent results, and that you are a client's dream. You were promoted to vice president of legal affairs, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, then you were sexually harassed in the most grotesque and terrifying ways, and when you reported it, you suddenly became the victim of what you call a campaign of retaliation and intimidation by the company, which was insulated by the forced arbitration agreement and felt it could cover up everything. Now, amazingly, if I'm reading your testimony right, you are being sued for their attorney fees. And let me just see if I can recap this. Tell me if I get it wrong. But they moved to compel arbitration. You defended against that based on the New York state law, which said that those forced arbitration agreements are no good in New York law. You won at the district court level, but then the appeals court essentially changed the result by saying it's not retroactive to cases of sexual harassment that took place before the state legislature acted. Now they're coming after you for attorney's fees. This $330 billion company with $60 billion in annual profits, whose employees subjected you to really vicious sexual harassment and assault, they want you to pay them how much money?
I don't know the exact amount, but I presume it's about $500,000.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars they're looking for. And amazing to me that along the way, Louis Vuitton tried to displace responsibility that they have as a corporation operating in New York State, in the United States, by saying that there was a difference between American and French culture, which is a great insult to the French, especially because your harasser was American, right?
Yes, and when I worked in France, I was never sexually harassed or assaulted in France.
They are just adding insult to injury at every turn here. I would hope that they're not stating that that's French culture, because I know sexual harassment is against the law in France as well. I want to thank Mr. Gates for supporting the legislation against forced arbitration. This is not a partisan problem. The divide here is between those who think that corporate contracts can override the Constitution of the United States and federal law, and those of us who want to stand up for every citizen's right to go to work in dignity, free from assault and harassment. So I support this legislation very strongly. I want to thank these remarkable witnesses for their courage. It's amazing to me that two of you are lawyers, which I think just reflects the extent of this problem of forced arbitration agreements stuck into these contracts. And if anybody might have caught it and been able to stop it, it would have been lawyers, and you were not able to, and you guys speak for hundreds of thousands or millions of women, and indeed some men across the country. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Ms. Jayapal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just start by saying thank you so much to Ms. Spottiswoode, to Ms. Newton, and Ms. Henry for your testimony and for giving courage to millions of women across this country. I know this isn't easy, and I'm sorry that this is what you have to go through. I am a very proud co-lead of this bill, the bipartisan, bicameral legislation, the Ending Forced Arbitration for Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act, which would preserve the right for sexual assault and harassment survivors to choose how they seek justice. So you have my deepest, deepest appreciation.
And how about you, Ms. Newton?
I had
You
similar
share-
feelings, yes, about how I felt. I was just demeaned. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mask, but I felt extremely demeaned and humiliated. I felt that I was being made an example of, that I was being used as a poster child of, don't come to us with this type of thing, otherwise we will name you in an email by the CEO. We will, sit you in the side and sit the harasser up front. Similar to what Laura said, I felt very isolated. I think I've even written to friends, I feel beaten down. I said that.
If you can, just very succinctly, how have your experiences enduring these horrific sexual violence and also arbitration and retaliation affected your physical and your mental health? Ms. Newton, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. For me, my physical health has been jeopardized constantly. I was hospitalized twice last year. I have been diagnosed with PTSD. I have now a team of medical advisors because of all of the consequences I've suffered in having to deal with the amount of stress that this causes me. And I had to take medical leave earlier this year. So it's a constant source of damage to my emotional and mental and physical health as well.
I have a few questions for Ms. Newton. Ms. Newton, you described the CEO of Louis Vuitton sending an email to the entire company a day after your complaint in court. How did that make you feel?
It felt awful, and let me just briefly say I work for the holding company LVMH, their American affiliate, but it felt humiliating. I was sitting at my desk when that email was sent, working. I was already afraid to have filed a complaint against my employer while working, sitting at my desk, going through my emails, doing my work, and I see it popped up. And the whole email was basically about my case, totally discredited me. As an attorney, I pride myself on my credibility, and it's what we hold as our value as attorneys, and that was completely destroyed in a second.
In your time at Louis Vuitton and the holding company, did the CEO ever issue this type of company-wide email?
Never, nothing like it. Not attacking an employee about reporting sexual harassment or anything near it.
Is it your impression at the time that the email was in retaliation for you filing the sexual harassment complaint?
Definitely. The extent that it went to, it wasn't just a bland email. It was several paragraphs long, several sentences long, and the extent it went to mischaracterize what had happened and the nature of my complaint was definitely done with an intent to not only silence me, but to send a message to other people. We will crucify you if you report and if you do things like this.
Was it your impression this was damage control by the company?
Yes.
If the CEO ever thought his behavior would be made public, do you believe he would have taken this action?
No, I think every single move they made was because they knew that eventually, as they succeeded to do, they would get this into a closed-door proceeding.
Ms. Newton, you were asked to apologize to your harasser. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, yes.
And did they explain why you had to do that?
They said that the stalker, he couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat because I had confronted him about the harassment, and he needed to be able to do his job, and therefore I should apologize to him.
Has your standing at Louis Vuitton and the holding company been impacted since reporting your harassment?
Since reporting it, I've received negative reviews. My annual salary increase went down, my bonus went down. I've probably been passed over for promotions to subsidiary companies. My career has been stalled and has just been put on ice, really, and potentially damaged in the future.
If employees were able to pursue traditional lawsuit before a jury of one's peers, do you believe the company would be forced to take sexual harassment allegations seriously?
100%. I think the fact that they know that eventually this will be behind a closed door completely colors every single action that they take in responding to it. They know this will never see sunlight. Therefore, we can do whatever we want.
Knowing what happened to you at Louis Vuitton and the holding company, and the company's response, do you believe that other victims at the company will come forward to report sexual harassment or sexual violence in the workplace?
Sorry, just so I understand your question correctly, are you saying other employees at LVMH will come forward after they... Sorry, could you just rephrase?
No problem. I apologize. Okay. Knowing what happened to you and the knowledge of what happened to you,
I see.
What's going to be the impact on other employees who may have, sadly, similar type claims?
Oh, yeah, I think this is going to stop them from ever coming forward. This type of crucifixion, making a public shame out of me, is nothing that anyone would want to go through. It's just devastating and humiliating and degrading. And I think they were showing other people, if you do this, you will go down like she did.
Your courage is really amazing. Thank you for your testimony today. I yield back.
To the lawyers, did you feel the same way? Did you feel as though your rights were stripped away from you? Not just the assaults, the attacks, the rape, but did you feel your constitutional right was taken from you, Ms. Newman?
Definitely. In law school, constitutional law was my favorite course. And my parents are immigrants here, and one of the things I think, coming from an immigrant family, that people admire all over the world is our judicial system. I remember my mom saying to me when we were young, in America, you have this right. If something goes wrong, you have your right to a day in court. So I felt like that was totally taken away from me, and no one even knew.
You, armed with a law degree, had your right taken away from you.
Yes.
Thank you. And to our survivors and heroines here, what kind of message do you think this sends to more junior people in the businesses where you've worked, and to other institutions about what kind of behavior will be tolerated? And please pipe up as you wish.
I can start. I think I had in mind those young people when I reported, because it was one thing for me to be going through this. I thought about all the girls that I've mentored over my life, there's other students, and my niece, my friends' children, and just thought about, if I, a lawyer, an executive at a company, am not able to feel comfortable speaking up about these things, and if I am shot down and attacked for doing that, what will they be able to do? So I think that what these companies do is meant to silence people and make them not complain and make them keep quiet and just allow the harassment to continue.